that every consideration is taken of making sure that is addressed, and not that we don't cause ourselves more problems with some of this flooding that we already know is a possibility with the level of rainfall that's expected.
Mayor Tory, what about what you've heard from Toronto Hydro, given that we've been getting more ice pellets and freezing rain? It's a very different situation than that big ice storm.
The hydro people have actually had a relatively uneventful time thus far, but they're on standby. They have people on high alert, as they call it in their lexicon, because if there's an accumulation of ice, which of course we may go through today depending on how the forecast turns out, that plus the high winds that are expected later today could cause problems with trees, impacting on hydro lines or just hydro lines coming down themselves. But thus far, there've been very few outages in the city, and the outages they've had, for example, a couple of them were caused by cars running into hydro poles. So far so good. You don't want to hex them. You want to keep your fingers crossed that things stay as they are and we get through this period of the high winds and the sort of ice accumulation, and come out the other end with some rain, and then spring arrives.
Just contracts ended at midnight last night.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Contracts ended at midnight last night.
I can't, but
it's actually midnight tonight. Yeah. So the remainder of our major equipment contracts and winter contracts end at midnight tonight. And so, because typically we plan that looking out over the course of history and when we typically have events into April. And so mid-April is typically the last time that we're going to see something happen. And again, we have called back those contractors that we needed to have in place in order to have appropriate response for the storm.
So will it be reconsidered for next year, maybe extending it to the end of April and looked at again?
We always do an after action anytime we have a response like this, and we'll make that determination. I believe we have the appropriate level of equipment that's out on the street right now. We feel comfortable with the response that's happening, and we'll continue, as I mentioned, to monitor. But we'll certainly take a look when we do our after action.
So if it ends at midnight tonight, though, what if it's needed, shifts and weather continues?
So we still have our own internal crews, which is not an insignificant amount of equipment to have out on the street, and then we also can certainly have further conversations if we absolutely have to bring contractors back in.
yeah, and can I emphasize that point that Barbara just said? We have the ability to call people back if we feel that it's not, the resources are not up to the job, and there is no budgetary constraint on this whatsoever in the context of saying that somehow, that affects these decisions. They have to pick a date, and they picked a date based on historical information about weather mid-April, and I think most people would understand that's sensible, because you also don't want to waste the taxpayers' money by having people on contract in May when it doesn't generally snow. Although this year anything's possible, but so there are no budget constraints. Barbara Gray and her team have the ability to call back resources if they're needed. But again, today there has been a conscious decision made that, not because of resources, but because of planning ahead for what we know or what we're best informed is likely to happen with the weather, to make sure we don't cause a problem by plowing this slush onto the catch basins. And I think that was the right decision based on everything I was told upstairs based on the weather forecast. And it has nothing to do, though, with any budget constraints or with any decisions. And that's why the date is unlikely to change. It's been that date, I think, for a long time, because monitoring of history shows that that's the time when these events pretty well pass us by, but if they needed more, they would call more people back, and they could.
We just passed a vehicle in the ditch on the hearing an increase in collisions from Toronto Police or anything of that sort?
I was going to say we're monitoring that. We have not really seen a significant increase in collisions on Toronto roads. I believe that was a vehicle that hit a pole. Is that the one you're referring to, or is in the ditch on the side? So we're monitoring that. We're making sure, again, that emergency vehicles have the opportunity to get there and trying to get those lanes open as quickly as possible.
Maybe we'll just conclude on that note, which is to say to people once again, if we can, please stay home today. Take advantage of the opportunity. If you need to phone somebody with an excuse that it's bad weather, phone them and just tell them you're not going out, or email them. But if people could just stay off the roads today, that would be the best. This is going to pass. We're going to be into the rain by the end of the day, and it would just be helpful if people wouldn't be on the roads today. And it isn't, it's tricky. The driving is tricky, so why subject yourself to the stress and to the possibility of a collision? So please, if you can stay off the roads, that will just help everybody. And it'll make for a less stressful day, and then this too shall pass, and we'll be into better weather tomorrow and better sport.